members of MS-13.
Will you give Mr. Abrego Garcia the due process that the Supreme Court and Judge Wilkinson has required you to give him?
Abrego Garcia is an El Salvador resident who is in his home country. If he were to come back to this country, he would be immediately removed again.
How do you know?
He has received and been treated appropriately.
Hello, loyal patriots, and welcome back to Maga Capital, your go-to source for bold, unfiltered truth, where we hold the radical left accountable and defend the values that make America great. Before we get into today's explosive breakdown, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. The mainstream media won't report these facts, and big tech wants to silence our voices. So it's up to you to help spread the truth by supporting real American platforms like this one. Today we're reacting to a heated exchange between Representative Dan Goldman and Secretary Kristi Noem over the case of Kilmar Abrego Garcia. This was one of those moments where the mask came all the way off. Goldman, a Democrat from New York and one of the most arrogant left-wing activists in Congress, went on a tirade, accusing Kristi Noem of defying the Supreme Court, defending due process for a known MS-13 gang member, and essentially acting like the United States Constitution is a weapon for criminals and terrorists. Let me tell you what this really was. A Democrat using legal technicalities and activist judges to defend a foreign criminal over the safety of the American people. That's not justice. That's betrayal. Goldman tried to paint himself as the voice of the Constitution, claiming he's not defending a gang member, but defending due process. But let's call it what it is. This was advocacy for a known, violent foreign gang member. According to law enforcement, Kilmar Abrego Garcia is a member of MS-13, a gang known for beheadings, child trafficking, murder, and torture. And Goldman is spending his time in Congress demanding that this man be brought back to the United States so he can receive another round of due process. Now let's get this straight. Multiple immigration judges, federal investigators, and law enforcement officers deemed Abrego Garcia to be MS-13. He was deported to El Salvador, his country of origin. But here comes the left, once again trying to weaponize the court system to override national security decisions and bring this man back.
I now recognize Mr. Goldman for 5 minutes questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to go back to Mr. Kilmar Abrego Garcia's case, Madam Secretary. But my first question for you is a pretty simple one. It's basic civics. Which branch of government does the Constitution give the authority to interpret what the law is, the judiciary or the executive branch?
Sir, going forward, the interpretation of the law, you make the laws in this body. The judicial branch makes sure that they have integrity and they're applied properly to individuals.
So I'm just going to take that as the judiciary branch. Now, let's focus for a second on what the judiciary branch has said about this case. We know the Supreme Court has said 9-0 that notwithstanding your statements under oath here today that Mr. Kilmar Abrego Garcia was afforded due process, he was in fact not afforded due process, because then if he were, you would have seen the withholding order that did not permit him to be deported to El Salvador. Now you allege, and I guess the Attorney General alleges, that he's a member of MS-13. That may very well be the case. And if he is, now that is a foreign terrorist organization, certainly the immigration laws would allow him, and in fact require him, to be deported. I certainly would support that. But the problem that we have here is what you allege, what Ms. Green alleges, what the Attorney General alleges, is not the judiciary. You don't get to decide whether or not he is an MS-13 member. And you don't have to take my word for it, because Judge Wilkinson, a Fourth Circuit judge, very conservative, addressed this argument. He said, the government asserts that Abrego Garcia is a terrorist and a member of MS-13. Perhaps, but perhaps not. Regardless, he is still entitled to due process. If the government is confident in its position, it should be assured that position will prevail in proceedings to terminate the withholding of removal order. Will you commit right now to give Mr. Abrego Garcia that process where you can prove your allegation that he is a member of MS-13?
Congressman, that judge that you just quoted did not say he was not a member of MS-13. Who did say that he was a member of MS-13 was law enforcement officers that encountered this individual.
Yeah, he knows that. This is a Fourth Circuit judge. He knows all of what the evidence is, and he's saying if that evidence. So you're not going to commit to follow this order. You won't commit to follow this court order.
By the way, he identified
Madam Secretary,
himself.
I reclaim my time. Stop filibustering. Stop filibustering.
He was surrounded by gang members of MS-13.
Will you give Mr. Abrego Garcia the due process that the Supreme Court and Judge Wilkinson has required you to give him?
Abrego Garcia is an El Salvador resident who is in his home country. If he were to come back to this country, he would be immediately removed again.
How do you know?
He has received and been treated appropriately, sir, and he is not.
How can you say he's been treated appropriately if the Supreme Court has ruled 9-0? 9-0 that he hasn't been treated appropriately. Why is your opinion better and have more authority than the Supreme Court?
Investigators, 2 judges, an immigration court that all said he was MS-13 and was removed from this country.
But you understand, that is you saying that. That is you saying that.
That is them saying that. This is
no.
investigators and law
that is
enforcement
you
officers
making that
in the case they
determination
built against him. If you don't trust
the
our law
court
enforcement
has
officers
considered all that.
and
The judge has considered all that, Madam Secretary. And if you would be quiet, because I'm reclaiming my time, you are not following this court order. But let's focus on the court order, because this opinion also says that to facilitate, which the Supreme Court is requiring, is an active verb. It requires that steps be taken. What steps have you taken to return Mr. Abrego Garcia to allow him to get due process?
Abrego Garcia is in his home country.
What steps have you taken?
If your continued advocacy for him were to...
I'm not advocating for him. I'm advocating for a court order, Madam Secretary. The court order says that you must take steps to follow the court order. You are here under oath. What steps have you taken to return Mr. Abrego Garcia pursuant to this court order?
It's got to be extremely discouraging to be one of your constituents. To see you fight for a terrorist like this and not fight for them is extremely alarming to me.
I'm fighting for due process, and that's under the Constitution.
Gentleman's time has expired.
Due process.
The gentleman's time has expired. I now recognize...
When Kristi Noem pushed back and stood firm, when she refused to bow to this activist attack, Goldman lashed out, telling her to be quiet and accusing her of ignoring a court order. That right there is the disrespect the radical left has for conservative women, for strong leaders, and for anyone who dares to challenge their twisted interpretation of justice. Let's be clear about what's happening here. The Supreme Court may have ruled that due process was not properly applied in this particular case, but that does not erase the fact that this individual was identified by law enforcement as a dangerous MS-13 gang member. The role of the federal government is to protect the American people, not invite in violent criminals to exploit our legal system. The left wants to create a world where foreign criminals are protected, where our borders are erased, and where our laws are manipulated to benefit the worst of the worst, all under the guise of compassion and due process. But we see through it. This isn't about justice. It's about undermining the rule of law to push a radical open borders agenda. Kristi Noem handled herself with strength, poise, and principle. She refused to back down when confronted with Goldman's hostile interrogation. And when he tried to twist her words and shout her down, she stood her ground. That's leadership. That's patriotism. Dan Goldman, on the other hand, showed the American people exactly what the modern Democrat Party stands for. Not for you, not for your safety, not for your family, but for the rights of violent foreign nationals who never should have been in this country in the first place. Let's also talk about the hypocrisy here. When Republican leaders enforce immigration laws, the left runs to the courts and cries authoritarianism. But when Democrats want to weaponize the judiciary to drag dangerous criminals back into our country, suddenly it's following the Constitution. If this doesn't make your blood boil, I don't know what will. We're watching the radical left fight tooth and nail to tear down every protection this country has left. And unless we speak up, unless we stand firm, they will succeed. So what can you do? First, subscribe to Maga Capital right now. Share this video with your friends, family, and every American who still believes in justice, borders, and the rule of law. Like this video, comment below, and let us know what you think of Dan Goldman's shameful display. Should violent gang members be brought back to the United States for more courtroom games? Or should they be removed and kept out permanently? The line has been drawn, patriots. On one side, we have leaders like Kristi Noem who are fighting for American sovereignty. On the other, we have radical elites like Goldman who are more interested in defending terrorists than protecting you. This is MAGA capital. We don't stay silent. We don't apologize for telling the truth. And we're not backing down from this fight. Thank you for watching. Stay strong. Stay vigilant. And as always, God bless America.